Making sure that that is happening. Last time I went live too early, and this time apparently I'm going live too late. All right, so here we are. Thank you for joining us, Mindy, as well. So this is Chat and Try. Me and Melanie are going to speak about Sutra 246. It's definitely one of my favorite sutras, or at least one of my favorites to. Last time I went live too early. Oh wait, what's happening? I'm going live too late. All right, so here we are. Thank you for joining us.
Lagging.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I heard myself speaking through the YouTube technology. Still getting used to it. So we're going to be talking about Sutra 246. It's definitely one of my favorites to give to students because I see a lot of inappropriate effort and a lot of inappropriate ease at varying times. So Sutra 246 is Sthira Sukham Asanam, which translates to, so Sthira, often translated as like stable or strong, some sense of stability, of groundedness. You can also think of it as a quality of alertness. Sukham is often translated as a good or a happy place, a place of relaxation or a place of letting go, a place of ease. And so, you know, when you throw the asanam part into that asana is meant to be executed, or I hesitate to use the word performed because you're not performing, but you are performing an action. It's meant to be executed in a place where there is balance between effort, muscular effort, focal effort, those kind of things, and ease, muscular ease, focal ease, that kind of thing. There is this, we talk a lot about finding balance in yoga and not just like balancing on one foot or trying to find balance in our lives and those kind of things. And I like to usually get into balance is not always 50-50. So if you look at the concept of Sthira and Sukham, in certain postures, there needs to be more effort given in order to hold the posture. Boat pose comes to mind, but then there also needs to be some ease in order to also hold the posture. But whatever those ratios are going to be different. Like there's going to be a lot more ease in Shavasana than there is in like Pincha Mayurasana or forearm balance or something. But way less effort in Shavasana than there is going to be in like Pincha Mayurasana. So it's not always necessarily equal, but we utilize those shifting ratios to find a balance, to find appropriate effort and appropriate ease based on the immediate situation that we're in, whether it's a particular posture or something off the mat, some particular event, global event, microcosmic event on an individual level, whatever we're finding ourselves in on or off the mat. It's about finding that balance that doesn't always mean, you know, 50% effort and 50% ease, that there is varying ratios in order to find what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. This is where if we shift over into inappropriate effort or inappropriate ease, that's where suffering is going to start coming into play. You know, if you find like grip or tension in the jaw, you're going to start having headaches and things like that. You know, if you're clenching your jaw in order to hold warrior pose, eventually tension headaches are going to come about. These kind of things. So kind of getting, I want to cover like the on the mat stuff before we get into the off the mat stuff, because I don't know, that to me the philosophical stuff is the more interesting. Anyways, so hatha yoga, the physical posture yoga, is a balance of sun being the ha and the moon being the ta. So this balance of sun and moon in our physical practice, the balance of effort and ease, the balance of masculine and feminine, of of being an active force or a receptive force. So there is a balance between give and take as well. Um, you can also relate it to the two sides of breath, the inhale being the stira, the stability, the drawing in of a foundation, versus the sukham, the exhale, the letting go, the release, and finding a balance between that, right? In a pranayama practice, we're not always just focusing on a really long inhale and a really short exhale, or even an equal inhale and exhale. That different pranayama practices, different pranayama techniques involve varying the ratios to receive or to reap different benefits within whatever technique you're practicing. Um, Inhalation can also be thought of as a creation of space. You're creating greater space within the physical lungs themselves, the expansion and all of that, creating more space in the rib cage by letting them expand. But we also think of inspiration with our inhales as creating more mental space, right? Nourishing those kind of things. Same thing with the exhale. It's a contraction, it's a grounding, it's a down. It's letting things go that no longer serve us. Finding that appropriateness of whatever it happens to be in the moment, and whatever is most beneficial. What do you think, Melanie?
as ever, thinking so many things. One of the things that Sarah touched on in talking about inhalation, exhalation, inspiration, expiration, stira and sukham. Sukham can loosely be translated to joy. And one aspect of joy that I've spent some time meditating on that word and on that. So joy sounds, it's hard to place joy as, it's hard to give it a place in your vocabulary as a noun or a verb. But what is that? What does that mean? It's an interesting and sort of odd word in that way, but it's something that has to be experienced. Joy is something that lives in the moment. So while you might have a feeling of sentimentality or pleasure from recalling a memory, or you might have anticipation of something great that might happen in the future, joy exists in the present moment. And so there's something really spectacular about the idea that you're intending to cultivate the alertness of what's happening in that moment. You are capable of receiving joy in the asana when you are practicing through this sutra. And you are, as Sarah was pointing out, you are opening to it, and you are also letting go of whatever, your breath, your tension. We talk a lot about how, you have to, whether you're lifting weights or doing yoga or walking, running, swimming, any of those things, your breath is what powers you through those physical activities. People talk about runner's bliss. I have no idea what they're talking about. I experience a state of Tourette syndrome when I'm running. There's nothing but active cussing going on when I'm told to run. The fight or flight is like, no, I'm just going to stay here and fight you because I don't want to run.
Same.
That's how bad I don't want to run. Anyway, so yeah. Sorry, a little off track there, but yeah. So one of the things in sort of preparing for this, and I told Sarah beforehand, like, that I walked off without my notes. I came to Colorado and I left my notes in Oklahoma. But something that I was thinking about is in your off the mat practice or in your on the mat practice, what do you notice yourself doing when you really do make yourself present on the mat? What is it you notice yourself doing, and does it serve? And we ask you to do that all the time, but but I think sometimes it's hard. It's hard to think about what that really means. Just to be present, like, oh, I'm being present, and frowning, and you hear Max's voice say, relax your face for the rest of your life. There are times you mentioned warrior and warrior two in particular. I noticed that it's like there are moments where I think my arms are coming out of my ears, growing from my jaw because I'm holding it, and so that obviously doesn't serve. The idea of ease in a pose.
Yeah.
But what do you do? What do you do that does serve? How can you turn your mind toward the more positive moments? What do you do on the mat and off the mat that bring you back to that space where joy is available to you? And I don't know how you guys feel about making a list, but like right now, right this minute, whether you type it into your phone or just make it in your head, think of 3 things that like, oh, that always makes me feel better. For me, it's, a cup of hot chocolate, hot coffee, hot tea. Doesn't matter. You can't drink it fast. You have to slow down. You breathe through your beverage. You smell the smells, whatever. It's an experience. It's an opportunity. And it helps me feel more grounded. So whether you share or not, think about what you do.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I really enjoy the ritual of tea, because it forces me to slow down and step back into the present moment.
Set a timer.
Set a timer.
Measure. There's measuring going on.
Yeah, all those little steps that, while some people might find tedious, of like, well, why don't you just, grab a tea bag and throw it in and boil some water? And I'm like, well, I like to do my own blend. I can do that, but it's also like, well, then I'll just do my 10 sun salutations and go to headstand and skip all the stuff in the middle. And it's like, yeah, while I'll get a decent movement, I'll loosen my body, I'll get 10% of the benefits. I'll get the hot beverage at the end, but it's really the middle stuff that matters. It's the slowing down and choosing, okay, well, today I'm going to have my cardamom black with my wild orange blossom, or maybe today it's going to be these 2 different blends, and I go through that whole ritual. It's something that saved me and my sanity in grad school. Was, okay, 3 p.m. every day, I'm going to make sure an experiment is running so that I don't have to stop.
Yeah.
And then I can stop and have my tea time. Same thing when I left grad school to open the studio. One of the things that I noticed was I started forgetting or not having enough time for tea time. And I started noticing more tension in my jaw. I started noticing more grumpy behavior and all those kind of things. And it seems so minor, of like, well, if she just stopped for 3 o'clock tea time, it seems so crazy that just stopping would kind of stop all those other things. Oh, do more yoga, stretch out, go get a massage. And it's like, really, the biggest fix was stopping for half an hour to make a cup of tea, or to walk up to the closest tea shop and serve that. Yeah, I can't imagine not having tea time. I mean, I went through it, but it was horrible. It's not a life I ever want to go back to. Not having tea time. That's why I use the hashtag. It's always tea time. There's always time for tea, and I, not just in the notion of tea, but more in the abstract sense of there is always time for you, and to do those things in order to become aware of what your actions do and how they cause inappropriate effort or inappropriate ease. Like, I definitely can lean towards the slothy side of life as well. While rest and relaxation and rejuvenation are good, too much of it becomes inappropriate ease, right? That's when you become lethargic and heavy, and that a sense of dullness. So it's relaxation without dullness. It's alertness without tension.
So with whether you share in the chat or whether you feel comfortable unmuting, does anybody want to share like a
Yeah.
whether you're on the mat, whether there's I'm sure at some point you've had a moment in your practice where you felt like, I just want to take my toys and go home. And there's something, you've managed to find something in there somewhere to say, no, hold on, we all have the inner toddler on the mat, I'm sure. So I'm curious, since this is supposed to be for all of you, not just for us to like blather at you.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to jump in? No.
Wild. I think Mindy's typing while she's typing.
Okay. Yeah, I can't.
For me, and this is pretty much almost every practice, or at least lately, I tell myself, okay, just get through your salutations, because I'm really much wanting to just not do anything. And I'm like, just make it through your salutations, and then you can make a cup of tea. And then I'm like, oh, I feel better. Okay, just make it through standing, and then you can stop and make a cup of tea. And then like I feel really good when it's time for seated postures. But like I have to do those things, because lately it's like I just want to take my toys and go home or crawl back in bed or whatever it is.
Well,
just be like,
the challenge of not having practice with people, that
absolutely.
I could definitely write an entire newsletter post about taking my fellow students for granted. I apologize to all of you who I've practiced with for taking your energy for granted. Yeah. Thank you for sharing it with me when I was with you, and I miss you so much, and I can't wait to practice with people again. But it definitely drove home why people struggle to have a daily practice, and why people struggle with isolation. Because at first it really didn't bother me. It was like, oh, it's kind of nice, it's quiet, I like the quiet. But to know really what it really was like to be on the mat in a group of people and feel like I couldn't keep going, and notice a surge of energy in the room because somebody else somewhere was like, oh, they're really getting it out and pushing through and making it happen. And that translates, that you can California woo-woo it all you want. It's real. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
I've had a hard time with my self-practice since the quarantine started, which for me is interesting because I would say most of my practice for 19, 20 years has been self-practice. Mm-hmm. And I think when this first started, I relied on other teachers' classes. Like, okay, I'm just going to sign up for all the classes and that's how I'll keep my practice going. But it didn't really work for me. And I do the same as Sarah. Like, I'll just, okay, don't worry about the dishes or whatever. Just do the sun salutations, because I know once I get through the Suryas, I'm going to want to keep going. And then, before I know it, it's been an hour and I'm like, oh gosh, I just feel so glorious. I'm going to keep going. And, but yeah.
Is it okay if I read that, Mindy? Okay. Yeah. So she shared, I find myself enveloped in the day-to-day tasks, so much so that I will use it as my excuse not to stop and have tea or coffee, PJ time or equivalent, and then get mad at those tension headaches. But taking that time helps me to be a better student and teacher. Synchronicity. My son just, yeah. Aw, well done. Yeah. It's hard to give yourself permission, and I find that those are the aspects of permission and performance have a big play in all of this. Do we give ourselves permission to find ease? Do we give ourselves permission to take that, to just take a break and slow down a little bit? But, also, I think you don't show up on your mat to not perform. And I don't mean perform for other people in the room. Right. I mean perform for yourself. We show up so that we can build. There's something we're choosing to build here. You're not paying for yoga to go lie in shavasana, no matter what the t-shirt says.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I think it can be even harder, as Mindy points out, at home.
Mm-hmm.
It can be so much harder because I think we are so much more in performance mode for other people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, choosing to do the thing for yourself
Mm-hmm.
can seem selfish. Even when the logic of that selfishness is, it doesn't exist. There is no logic to, oh, I'm thirsty, I should get a drink. No, I can't. That would be selfish. Really?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
But we do it to ourselves still.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, but to be able to give ourselves a half hour of practice or a ritualistic tea time or whatever it is, that translates over into selfishness in our own mental dialogue, not that other people are seeing us as selfish. From what I have learned of the people around me, they appreciate when I take my daily practice. They appreciate when I take my tea time, because I'm kinder and, more compassionate to them when I have those things, for me. But there's also, because I know I have this tendency towards the ease part of life, because for so long it was nothing but effort. So you have to be mindful that you don't kind of cross over into
Sure.
the other realm, that I find myself, not wanting to go as deep into chair, not wanting to go as deep into the warriors. I'll take my own practice sometimes on CBY TV just to hear my own cues, to give myself a little bit of that encouragement of like, I can lunge deeper, I can do these things, and exact a little bit more appropriate effort as opposed to excessive inappropriate ease. Because I realized just going through the motions, whether it's making a cup of tea or my practice, isn't going to benefit me. I may feel good towards the end, but again, it's like it's that middle part, that whatever we're doing to make that balance is
you're tapping
where
into
we're reaping the
some type of
benefits.
rhythm.
Yeah.
There's some drive, I think, toward finding flow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think before everybody started signing on, we started talking about the idea of collaboration, that your body and your mind are in kind of making a collaborative effort with your yoga practice. So there are times when I've started, teaching a practice and ask people to consider whatever it is I'm offering them, they can decide whether they want to offer it to themselves, as opposed to I'm telling you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think all of these things come back to balance, come back to what are we taking in, what are we putting back out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of an extension on that collaboration, and I think when we were talking about what we were going to talk about in this, the notes that you left back in Oklahoma, that it's a dialogue. Every asana is a dialogue within your own body, right? Can I go a little deeper in that lunge? Can I twist a little deeper? Do I need to pull back out? There's all of this dialogue happening in every single posture, that's how yoga, or that's how asana practice brings us into the present moment, is paying attention to that dialogue.
But
coming into
feedback, there's emotional feedback, there's intellectual feedback happening
Yeah.
rapid fire as you're moving through the practice. There's some really strange reflection that makes me look like I have a light mustache, and I'm trying to see.
Yeah, that's okay. You're bright and ebullient, like I've always said. Effulgent. That's the word I always use for you. You're effulgent.
Distracted
sorry.
like a cat with a laser pointer.
But essentially, yeah. So there's the dialogue within the body. There's a dialogue within this kind of call, right? Like it would be really interesting to listen to Melanie kind of what's the word I'm looking for? She probably knows. Kind of exposition about all of this, or it would also expound upon, and same thing with me. But I think it's much more interesting when we're dialoguing, when you guys contribute, and it becomes this conversation off the mat, out into the world. You know, light mustaches notwithstanding. but the idea is that whatever is happening, in order to find a sense of balance, there has to be a conversation. Mindy's got beverage game. Oh, nice.
I'm like, wait, that's a different drink. I want that too.
but the idea is that everything is a conversation, right? Whether it's in one-on-one relationships, whether it's within your own personal self relationship, on or off the mat, or just engaging with other people. And for the most part now, that is still mostly online, but
sure.
You know, a lot of places are getting open to public congregation, small group congregation.
That is the inhalation and exhalation. And so also in our notes, any of you who are Facebook pals might have seen something I posted I think last week, about the director, Mira Nair. She did Monsoon Wedding and The Namesake, and I was watching her masterclass, and she talks about the importance of being open to the world, allowing yourself to be vulnerable to your environment. Mm-hmm. And there is something of that in this conversation, in your yoga practice, and in how you shape your worldview. That if you have a worldview of no, block, then you know you're blocking the bad with the good with the bad. You're not taking a full inhalation. You're not making room inside of yourself. Whereas if you trust and you're vulnerable in the world and to the world, yeah, bad things might happen. Lots of really great things could happen too. And so your practice is risk, and how you take that off the mat is risk. It's brave. Yeah. So
taking leaps. I mean, anytime you talk about like bravery, and I always think of leaps, and of course that makes me think of Hanuman, and just all of that. And it's not like blind bravery either, right? It's there's discernment going on, and that's where the awareness comes in. Yeah. But yeah, risking little things. I mean, you don't want to like
when you don't breathe.
Yeah. I mean,
breathing is good. We'll just establish that. But the inhalation is required. The depth of the inhalation is up to you. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the living out there in the world is fairly required, and how much of the world you let in is up to you.
And how much you expand into the world. Yeah. Versus how much do you contract away from it.
And keeping in mind that the exhalation is the opportunity to let go of the stuff that, okay, that wasn't a good thing. I don't want to experience that again. Or I don't, you know, this is all just an experiment until we're taking the dirt nap, right?
Yeah, it's why we exhale to relax in Shavasana, whether a teacher cues it or not. And we probably, I know I do, at bedtime, like I lay in bed, like it's a sigh of relief to finally relax for the day. Sure. Or relax at the end of practice. It's that down. It's why our last breath ends on an exhale. Our first breath starts on an inhale of life, you know, for the whole spectrum. We start by taking an inhale, and our last thing we do on this earth is exhale. It's the final letting go. I don't know where I was going with that. But the idea is that you're right. Like you've got to let go of some things, otherwise it's nothing but tension and then headaches.
Yeah. Can you imagine just inhaling and never exhaling?
I think when I first started practicing Ashtanga, that's what that reminds me of, like just always inhaling, just like a perfectionist, going way too hard, hurting myself, and no, not giving myself, I wasn't listening to my bodily cues. I didn't know about them. But yeah, that's what I thought of when you said that.
Yeah. Yeah, your bodily cues were speaking in foreign language. What? Yeah. No. And so often we treat our body as an interruption.
Yes.
Like, I mean, injuries for me are an interruption and they piss me off.
And then we start to ignore them, right? And so how is that becoming aware of them, right? So I know we're talking a lot about Sutra 246, but if you also kind of bring in 247, 248, you're also looking at, okay, well, what does it mean to master an asana, right? It is that sense of relaxation and letting go and becoming aware of the pain and the suffering that we have in our body, and how to not just avoid unnecessary suffering. I don't want to get off on that diatribe, but like not avoiding in terms of ignoring when we feel injuries or pain or something like that. But when you start talking about 248, it's about acknowledging, say, back pain or hamstring pain or whatever. You've got to acknowledge the source of it. But in order to like dig to the roots of whatever that suffering is or whatever that pain is, you have to become aware of the pain. You can't ignore it. You can't be pissed at it. You can't let it become an interruption, because it's part of the process. I think last time we talked about how important disruption can be and how necessary disruption can be, because a lot of times it is that disruption that is like, okay, you've been checking out for a while. I'm going to bring your attention to this.
Right. Yeah.
So injuries can do that. It causes us to step back and getting to the source of it, because it's only once we get to the source can we heal it. Right? If we're like, oh, wow, every time I take this particular series of postures, that really hurts my hamstring. But it's Ashtanga, so it's right. And, all of those, like, we kind of fall back into the dogma. And it's like, well, maybe not. Maybe not for me. Maybe not at this time. Maybe I need to do something else. But I've got to figure out what the source is. You can't blame a practice. You can't blame a person, for whatever the situation is. You've got to get to the source of it. And that's what's going to start the healing.
Yeah. One of the scarier things about that is considering that it isn't always physical.
Well, like Sarah was saying right now too, it brings acceptance. For me, like personally, when Sarah was talking about the injuries and everything else, it's like with me with my liver. It's like every time I got injured, I just powered through and continued to practice, continued to ride my bike and everything else. But now with my liver, it's okay. And now I understand that until I heal, I either have to choose a yoga practice or a bike ride. Because if I do both, I'm going to end up with cramps and they're going to keep me from being able to do either one of them. And then I get pissed off at myself and I'm mad at myself because I can't do them. So it brings, for me, spiritual and emotional connection to the physical aspect of yoga and bike riding, because they're one and the same. They both bring the same level of spiritual and emotional connection to me as the physical element of it. But I always powered through all my injuries and now my illness until now. It's like, okay, I accept it. I accept that I can't just continue going because I want to continue going. My body's telling me you got to slow down. So that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about that.
Absolutely. And I think we talked about it before you hopped on, but yeah, no matter what the physical modality is, there is a place for stira and sukham, involved in that, and even allowing the pair of them, the fact that it's not just yoga and it's not just biking, but that you want to do both, and having to find that balance between the two. Like maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you could have done both. And now that it's not an option because you're healing in a completely different way, through your sobriety, through all of your injuries, through now your liver stuff. Like there's a lot going on. And every day, this, just like any particular asana, it's never just, oh, well, check, I got that posture, I don't ever have to do it again. It's the daily approach to it. Some days my headstand I can hold for 50 breaths, no problem. Other days it's like 10 and I'm shaking all over the place, and no matter what's going on, yeah, we're in different bodies 20 years ago than we are today. I'm in a different body than I was yesterday, based on the food that I ate, based on the quality of sleep that I got, based on how much tea I've had. I mean, it's, our body is physiologically always turning over, right? So literally and metaphorically, we are in different bodies than we were a week ago or 10 years ago. But we're also in a different mental place than we were yesterday, a week ago, 10 years ago. So we are not only physically changing, mentally changing, evolving, growing, all those kind of things.
That makes me ask the question, because I think there's a tendency, at least for me and Sarah, I'm going to speak for both of us, since we joke about being shared brain.
Yeah.
It's no joke. Anyway, just thinking that. I just want you to know that's not a joke, but that we tend toward the cerebral. I think in Max's first book, or maybe, I don't know, I feel like he does some writing about that there's the cerebral, the physical, the emotional sort of types. And,
that's his first one.
We'll have a tendency toward one of those, and definitely lean heavy in the cerebral. And that will cause me to overthink my practice. And I don't think I thought of it as necessarily a problem until I started lifting weights and had a trainer. And if any of you who've lifted weights before, if you try to lift weights like a yogi, you get tired a lot faster, because I'm like, is my shoulder blade on my back? Is my elbow tucked in? I'm moving like so slowly that there's no way I'm doing 15 bicep curls with a 10-pound dumbbell. It's not going to happen, because and if it does, it's going to take me half an hour to do it. But yeah, like it's amazing how the mind and its desperate determination to mine data from everything you're doing, from every experience, can hold you up and suck the joy and take away your ability to, oh, sorry about that, that's somebody outside. Can take the joy out of the moment. We can overthink ourselves into sadness. So, I wonder about that, like, because I don't know what it's like to be overly emotional in my yoga practice. I get emotional in my yoga practice, but I don't know what it's like to work through a practice thinking only of how does this make me feel? How does this and this make me feel? That's not what's happening. So I'm curious, Georging you guys right now.
Well, yeah, all of this has me thinking about, like, long before I ever started yoga, I took ballet since the age of 6, and it was all about, okay, well, we do our technique,
Precision,
and then we dance, right? Then we practice choreography, and then we perform, and we don't just perform technique, but we emote, and we try to achieve an emotion from the audience as well. There's a lot of emotion going on, but you have to do all of the technique and become very aware of it until you no longer have to be aware of it. And I initially took that into my yoga practice, and then somewhere along the way, it just became overanalysis on every little detail, because there was never the balance of performance, if that makes sense, because yoga is not meant to be a performance, right? It's meant to be a tool that we use to work on ourselves. And so it wasn't until I started taking ballet again, 20 years later, that I started realizing that and enjoying my practice in a completely different way again, that I could tap into those, okay, well, I've been practicing this technique for 20 years. I have it down for all intents and purposes of keeping me safe and those kind of things. I still have to be mindful and present because injury is always a risk, but I can let myself kind of drop back just a bit to actually enjoy the movement and the experience of the physical body moving through it. I resisted vinyasa classes for a long time, and sometimes I still do, because I didn't know what was coming next. I like having something known, because right now everything is unknown. So I'm like, my comfy blanket of Ashtanga, I always know what's going to happen. But I don't know where I lost that along the way in my yoga practice, as opposed to, that ballet where you work technique until you don't have to focus on technique, and you do it technique in every single class. Like, you never stop doing your bar work, your technique work. You never stop doing that. You just add on the emotional part of it as an addition, as opposed to in place of. And I think that is something that gets lost in yoga. Not just the, how does it feel? I think both can get lost. Too much of the feel, like just do what you feel, just, all of this. It's like, well, there still has to be technique underlying it,
well, even,
right? To keep everybody safe.
Even Kundalini, which often gets relegated to the feelies, has precision and technique and intention and form and order and all of those things to it. And but it comes back to this idea of permission. When do I have the technique down enough that I get permission to have the feelings? And so usually the feelings are relegated to Shavasana. And so, so I find myself on the floor going like this.
Yeah.
When I finally get to take the real exhalation, as opposed to all the ones I've been doing in the practice where I'm supposed to, the real exhalation of Shavasana becomes just a bath, my shower in Shavasana.
I often shared this story in teacher training, like when I'm leading a teacher training. I don't know if I share it often, like just in a general class setting. But yeah, usually you do relegate emotion to Shavasana because it's the easiest place to become vulnerable. But so it was when I was in Tahoe with Doug for the first time. We were going through, it was one of the Mysore practices, and I was in Sutra Karmasana. And so it was a teacher training, and each of the students, we had to like get up during Mysore for like 10 minutes and then assist everybody, and then we get back to our practice. I was in Sutra Karmasana, and one of the other students comes over to me, like noticing I had been there for probably longer than 5 breaths. And he like leans in, he goes, "Is everything okay?" And I'm in Supta Karmasana just crying. And I was like, "Yes, I'm fine. Just go away." And so he's like, "Okay, just wanted to make sure you weren't stuck there." And I kind of giggled. I'm like, "I'll be fine. Just go away." And but I said it very kindly. I didn't just go away. And so I stayed there and I cried for a little bit longer. I got out and I finished my practice. But it's not a posture that one, or at least a teacher would never really want a student to just break down crying in, because it's kind of scary for those who don't know what Supta Karmasana is. Like your legs are bound behind your head and your arms are bound behind your back. It's one of my favorites. But yeah, it's not a posture that people are usually going to have that kind of emotional response to, but there was a year of buildup of stuff that I finally felt safe enough to release it. Because like I said, Supta Karmasana is one of my favorites, and I literally get into my little turtle shell, and I felt safe crying amongst 30 people in the Mysore room, and I was just fine with that. But most people usually either cry in back bends or in Shavasana. Very rarely in a forward. I mean, people will cry in a forward fold, which is what Supta Karmasana is, but it's much rarer. But yeah, I always think of that when I think of emoting in practice, in the middle of, I mean, that's literally in the middle of the primary series. So.
For me, besides Shavasana, if there's an active pose where emotions will come, it's fire log.
Sure.
Deep hip work will always get things going. Sometimes it's kind enough to wait until after practice, but sometimes it's just like, it's a combination of actual physical discomfort and emotional whatever just comes out.
Yeah.
I get very irritable in that pose. Just
Fire log.
Yeah.
Fire log.
Yeah. It starts as irritability. It does. It starts as this really doesn't, I don't like the way this feels. And okay. So teacher confessions, teacher student confessions. When someone asks for that pose and I'm taking class, there's a part of me that looks around the room. This part of me, my eyeball part, looks around the room and checks to see if other people have tucked their feet in closer to their bum, because it's easier that way. Because that's not the pose. And so like the dictatorial part of me that's like, the reason you're able to do that is because you're doing it wrong. So yes, I am the inner jerk, looks around the room and has disdain for the people who are doing it wrong and therefore are comfortable. And that's the grumpy part. And then as I try to breathe into it and work, with the pose, then it almost always causes tears. It almost always just creates this kind of wild release up, into my abdomen and into my chest, and I just get really shaky and teary and all that. But not in an unpleasant way, but enough that it's like, why does this happen every time? So.
Well, the work happens in the discomfort, right?
Yeah.
Not to the point of injury, but
Sure.
but you're never going to have breakthroughs when it's a happy picnic amidst puppies and
Sure.
endless cups of tea. Like no growth is going to happen there. Like you might be really content, but there's not going to be any growth. It always happens in the place of discomfort and how you respond to that comfort versus being reactive to it. Yeah. How you respond to it. And that's where that discernment of like bringing it all the way back.
Irritation and viciousness.
Right. And you respond to it really well because you don't loose that venom on anybody else. You take it, you recognize it, and you're like, that's not who I am, at least not externally. Yeah, sure. Well, and that embarrassment is a self-judgment, right? That's a whole other thing. Don't self-judge.
Practice.
If somebody
say,
would have
Desiree?
a conversation with me in fire log, I might snap at them. I really get grumpy, and it's something that I have to breathe through and work through and potentially maybe get to the point, Melanie, like where I would cry, but I just resist. That's the one for me, I think I would snap, be like, what do you want?
And that's the key, right? You're resisting. You're not allowing that receptivity of the world or the receptivity of the tightness in your hips to come in and then let go.
Mine are tightening up thinking about it.
Mine are relaxing thinking about it. No, kidding.
I've never experienced any negative emotions when practicing, like anger or anything like that. It's really always been a healing. Sometimes they're sad tears, but sometimes, a lot of times, actually, they're happy tears. Because I've been using yoga as a tool for my inner child work. And well, Sarah was the one that introduced me to the meditation aspect of it and the emotional side of yoga. Because before I started taking yoga with Sarah, it was all just a physical thing, you know, going and doing the vinyasa and seeing how many calories I could burn. And, you know, looking back at it, I was being, you know, escaping, you know, and getting out of my head for an hour and practicing and everything else. But ever since I met Sarah, it's been more of a healing tool because it, you know, forward folds and you know, going through the different sequences, you know, I do. It's not until we sit and breathe, or we sit and or at the end, and we're laying, when it all just, like you said, it just comes to a head and you release it. But then you feel great afterwards, and relief, and I'll have a very good day afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same thing for me too. You know, I've, ever since I can remember college, I've always struggled with anxiety. And over the years, I've realized that, you know, a panic attack, when it would come on, is sort of this fear of feeling that you're not in control of the world around you. And, you know, earlier when you were talking, Sarah, about how vinyasa, you don't know what to expect. You know, I also struggle with vinyasa and Ashtanga. I was telling Desiree after one of her classes that I do find Ashtanga to be easier for me because I know exactly what's coming. With vinyasa, and again, I linked it to the anxiety that, and over the years, I've never, ever been against taking anything for it. So instead, I've tried to find the inner calm, the breathing. When I know that there's a lot going on in my life, my breathing, literally, it sounds like a dog panting, like it's, you're not taking in a full deep breath. And, you know, I've done yoga before, I've gotten away from it. I've come back to it because of I can't go to the gyms and sort of just run it off. So I would say that since about enters, it is a practice of sort of finding a balance. Finding balance, I think, for everybody is a challenge. I look around me and people are always struggling to find balance. You know, that is whether you're a working mom, stay-at-home mom, husbands who are, you know, just everybody that I meet struggles with it, whether it's what you eat. You know, it's, I find when I look at the world around me, there's always extremes. You know, come to the mat. You know, that to me has been sort of a saving grace for me since I've been back to the mat. And I try to practice as much as I can because it brings my breath back. I can breathe deeper. And if I feel, you know, oh, I feel like a panic attack's going to come on, and I haven't had very many. I think part of that is this fear of, oh my gosh, what's happening? And hey, you're going to get through this. Even at night, if I struggle to sleep, I think about my yoga practice that morning and I go, okay, I'm back on the mat. I breathe better and I fall asleep. So a healing thing. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. You know, there is a lot of that as long as we can kind of tap into the benefits that we reap from whatever it is that we are choosing to do, whether it's that regular yoga practice or running or swimming or cycling or what have you, then that's what we need to find within ourselves, right? And I think a lot of people struggle with finding balance. It's because they have a misconstrued idea of what balance is. What does Melanie say? Margaret Atwood says there's no such thing as balance so much as doing and not doing. She talks about letting go of trying to find, force, and force balance. Absolutely. That it's this, I like, when Tim, one of my teachers, Tim Miller, talks about appropriate effort and appropriate ease more so than the word balance, because we think of a gymnast, we think of standing on one leg, we think of, a teeter-totter or whatever, that what creates balance is equal weight on both sides or what have you. But the idea is that that there has to be some give and take on both sides, and that it's never, written in stone. Some days I need to do 15 salutations to build up enough heat. Some days I can get that heat in 5. And those two individual moments create balance, right? But it's not that I'll just do 10 because that's what the rules say. That it is letting go of the idea of whatever balance is in order to find balance, find that. I like the word harmony over balance, that it's letting go of that notion that everything's 50-50, because
It goes
nothing
back to the
ever
idea
is.
of it being a collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you spend all of your time in a collaboration keeping score, it's not much of a collaboration, and you build resentment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Can we end with a
Oh,
Margaret Atwood poem in a minute?
Yeah. Miranda, you share your thought, and then Melanie will close us out with the
I was gonna
poem.
say, like just pretty recently, actually, yoga or just being an athlete, physical activity was always a math equation. Whether it was how many wins, how many losses, what position you're going to play, then it would turn into calories. Once I got into being an older teenager, becoming a woman, it was just like, you have to have an hour of rest. If you do 2 hours of this, you can only eat 2 hours. You can eat this 2 hours before you do yoga, and then you have to have this right after. You have to have a certain amount of protein. And my life became so stressful and anxious. Like I can relate to, is it Sony or Sunny, when she talked about anxiety in terms of and yoga helping with that as well. And one of the reasons I gravitated towards Ashtanga is because to me it defies every single math equation I've ever had to solve in my entire life. It's literally the input is the same. You do the same poses every single day, but the output is always different. So it's like, to me, that saying of insanity, if you do the same thing every day and you expect the same result, like it's insanity. But to me, like yoga is insanity. You do the same thing every day. I'm not expecting the same result every day. I expect a different result, and it's kind of like blown my mind, and I love it. And I think that collaboration but I think that harmony is for me, it's the curiosity that I get when I lie in Savasana and I'm like, well, shit, this is a terrible prana day for me. Or great, I feel wonderful. Like whatever it was, I kind of have to accept it, whatever output that it is. And that translates into the rest of my day as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Love
that.
Yeah.
I'm all English and philosophy, but I'm super enamored of math. And that's beautiful. And most poets are secret mathematicians. They just don't actually know how to do it. They just don't know that they're doing it.
Yeah.
So we're a little over time, but if you guys have a second. So those of you who are in Houston, if you can ever pop down for something with Robert Bustani, he's wonderful. And one of the times that I was able to practice with him, he asked us to sit and look at our hands. And since I talk about being all cerebral, and now I'm going to get super emotional, but yeah, he had us look at our hands and just breathe and look at your hand. And it created a lot of emotion in the room before we started the practice. So if you notice my note in the comments, I mentioned Margaret Atwood. So those of you who are Atwood fans will appreciate this. I strongly encourage you to look at her poetry as well as her prose. And I just want to end us with one of her poems. It's called You Begin. I sent it to Sarah earlier, I think last week or the week before.
Yeah.
So I'll try not to be a sobby baby. You begin this way. This is your hand. This is your eye. That is a fish, blue and flat on the paper, almost the shape of an eye. This is your mouth. This is an O or a moon, whichever you like. This is yellow. Outside the window is the rain, green because it is summer, and beyond that, the trees, and then the world, which is round and has only the colors of these 9 crayons. This is the world, which is fuller and more difficult to learn than I have said. You are right to smudge it that way with the red and then the orange. The world burns. Once you have learned these words, you will learn that there are more words than you can ever learn. The word hand floats above your hand like a small cloud over a lake. The word hand anchors your hand to this table. Your hand is a warm stone I hold between 2 words. This is your hand. These are my hands. This is the world, which is round, but not flat and has more colors than we can see. It begins. It has no end. It has an end. This is what you will come back to. This is your hand.
I love it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It's a beautiful note to end on. I don't really have anything else to say. Other than if there, if there's something you guys want us to chat about, send us a little recommendation. Otherwise, Melanie and I can always come up with something. All right. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was wonderful.